It was one of those cold, gray November afternoons in Chicago, the kind that sinks into your bones like regret. I stood alone in a vacant lot, the wind slicing through my coat, my eyes scanning the ruins. Scattered chunks of charred wood, soot-smeared drywall, and jagged shards of broken glass littered the ground. Stray scraps of paper and debris danced around my boots, carried by the relentless wind. Looking at that burnt-out wasteland, I couldn't help but feel like it was a perfect mirror of what my life had become: an empty, gutted shell. Cold, broken, abandoned. A monument to bitterness, loneliness, and all the ways I'd failed. I nudged a chunk of crumbled concrete with my foot, trying not to think too hard, but of course, I did anyway. What the hell was I supposed to do with what was left? I met Lauren at a charity fundraiser just a few weeks after my 29th birthday. Back then, I was second in command at the family's retail company, and my great-uncle Walliser, CEO and the guy holding most of the shares, basically ordered me to go. "Shake hands," he said. "Be seen. Maybe drum up some goodwill." The event turned out to be a slow-motion nightmare: dozens of overinflated egos in expensive clothes, pretending they were saints because they'd raised 10 grand for a new public library. I stood there nursing a drink, forcing polite smiles, nodding at dull stories, biting my tongue so hard it might have left a scar. I kept glancing at the exit, praying for an excuse to leave, when she just appeared, slipping quietly into the seat beside me like she belonged there. She flashed me a megawatt smile, tilted her head, and said something like we were already old friends. Lauren moved with this effortless grace. She was slim, bronze-skinned, soft brown waves framing her face. The way she spoke had this quiet confidence that made every word feel easy, natural. Suddenly, I didn't mind being at a fundraiser. Suddenly, I wanted to stay. I've always been driven aggressively so. In school, sports, business, I went hard. But socially, I was awkward as hell. After business school, I married my job, and that didn't leave much room for dating. I rarely approached women unless I'd known them for years. But Lauren? She was different, irresistibly different. By the end of that night, I couldn't help myself. I asked her out to dinner. To my surprise, we had a damn good time. She was sharp, funny, curious. We shared interests, swapped opinions, laughed like we'd known each other for ages. We clicked. Hard. And when I dropped her off, there was no doubt we'd be seeing each other again. The romance escalated quickly. We were soon meeting up a couple of times a week, sometimes more, and the time we spent together was electric. We talked, we laughed, and yeah, we had a lot of sex. I was crazy about her. More than that, I was falling in love, fast, and it felt like she was right there with me. Still, despite everything, I hesitated. I wanted to take things further, but I didn't want to screw it up by moving too fast. I wasn't exactly Casanova, far from it. Most of my adult life had been boardrooms and spreadsheets, not bedrooms. I was worried that if I pushed too hard, I'd blow it all up. But Lauren wasn't about to wait. One night, as I awkwardly leaned in to say goodnight at her door, she didn't lean back. Instead, she grinned, unbuttoned my pants, and literally dragged me inside by the one part of me that had no objection to following her anywhere. I wasn't a virgin, but let's just say my experience was limited. I'd always figured that unfiltered sexual hunger was a male domain, turns out. Lauren was more than happy to shatter that belief. What happened next made a mechanical bull ride look like a nap, and by the time we were done, I was wiped physically, emotionally, completely. I remember lying there, staring at the ceiling, heart pounding, body buzzing, thinking, that was the best thing I've ever experienced in my life. From that night on, sex wasn't just something we did, it was something that happened easily, naturally, often. And as that part of our relationship deepened, so did everything else. A few months later, we moved in together. A little over a year after that, we were married. We found a 4-bedroom house in a leafy, quiet neighborhood with sidewalks, barking dogs, and the occasional kid selling lemonade on Saturdays. We landscaped the yard, got a dog cooper, A golden retriever who loved socks more than toy sand settled into what felt like the life people post about on social media. And I loved it. Almost every part of married life fit me like a tailored suit. The loneliness I'd been too proud to admit was gone. I had emotional support. A partner I could talk to, or at least I thought I could, and the physical closeness I'd never truly had with anyone else. We had love, sex with meaning, companionship, a future. It wasn't perfect, but damn if it wasn't good. Of course, there were cracks subtle, hairline fractures you don't notice right away. I was always a bit swamped at work. Lauren, unsurprisingly, wasn't thrilled with how little time I had for her. I'd come home mentally fried, and all she wanted was connection, attention, sometimes affection I couldn't immediately give. And I'm sure I had habits that annoyed her too, leaving socks on the floor, being too controlling with money, checking emails during dinner. You know, normal husband stuff. But the real tension came from one unavoidable truth. I had to deal with her family way more than I wanted to. Now, to be fair, they weren't terrible people. Her parents were warm, loud, and big on hugs. They liked me just fine. Too fine, maybe. They loved giving advice, especially about how we should live, which often sounded like, "When are you going to give us grandkids?" But we didn't spend enough time with them for it to become truly annoying. Annoying, adjacent, maybe. Her younger sister, though that was another story. Emma. Emma was like a shorter, puffier version of Lauren. Same fashion sense, same speech patterns, same laugh. They were practically interchangeable at times, same taste in music, same guilty pleasures, same borderline obsession with skincare products. And when Lauren and Emma were together, it was like I didn't exist. They whispered like co-conspirators, cracked inside jokes I couldn't decode, and had endless conversations about family drama, real and imagined. And since Emma and her husband lived just 15 minutes from us, we ended up seeing them way more than I cared to. Now, maybe I'm being petty. Maybe it was jealousy, but I couldn't help but feel like when Lauren was with her sister, I lost her completely. She wasn't my wife, she was part of a duo, and I was just the third wheel spinning in the background. Emma's husband didn't help. Derek was tall, had surfer boy good looks, and carried himself with a sort of clueless charm that wore thin quickly. He was the type of guy who called everyone buddy and meant it, but you knew within 5 minutes he wasn't really listening to anything you said. He ran a furniture store in Joliet that had been in his family for 2 generations. And if you heard him talk about it, you'd think it was some kind of Silicon Valley startup instead of a small-town furniture shop that barely kept the lights on. To hear Derek tell it, he was reinventing the entire industry. He talked about supply chains and customer experience like he was Steve Jobs redesigning the iPhone. The problem? His store was tanking. It didn't take a genius to see either, even a decent accountant. And the root of the problem, as far as I could tell, was Derek himself. But I didn't say that. I kept my mouth shut. Because keeping Lauren happy meant not rocking the family boat. So I smiled, nodded, and endured countless evenings listening to Derek pontificate about recliner trends like they were geopolitical events. I hated it. But I loved her. And that was the deal. I'd spent more than a few evenings before that just sitting there, nodding along like a zombie while Derek went on and on about furniture margins like he'd cracked the code to e-commerce. But this time, it wasn't Derek talking. It was Lauren. We'd been married for almost 2 years when she brought it up. I should have seen it coming from the moment I walked in the door that night. She'd set the table like we were celebrating something candles, soft jazz playing in the background, wine already breathing in the decanter. She wore this little black dress that she knew drove me nuts. All signs pointed to one hell of a night in bed. And honestly, I was looking forward to dessert before the main course was even over. But the longer we talked, the clearer it became that this wasn't seduction, it was strategy. She started laying the groundwork subtly, like she was painting a picture of how fortunate we were. "We're doing so well," she said. "Better than most. It just feels wrong not to help someone when you can help." I took the bait. "Help who?" With a dramatic sigh and just the right amount of guilt in her voice, she finally let it drop. Emma and Derek were struggling, really struggling, behind on bills. The store couldn't afford new inventory. Creditors were circling. Lauren leaned in, clasping her hands like she was confessing to something terrible. If they don't get help soon, Derek won't be able to place his next order. They'll fall even further behind. And then, she trailed off, as if the mere thought was too awful to finish. I stared at my plate for a moment, watching a drop of wine ripple in the glass. I knew exactly where this was headed. Okay, I said slowly. How much do they need? She blinked, clearly thrown off by my directness. That wasn't in the script. Chewing her lip, she finally looked up at me. 50, maybe 60,000. That would give them breathing room, confidence. I damn near choked on my drink. Yeah, we were doing all right, but most of my cash was tied up in a family trust. 60 grand wasn't pocket change, it was a serious hit to our liquid assets. Technically, I could pull the money if I needed to, but doing so would mean dealing with Bernie Blackman, our family's business attorney and the trust's bulldog guardian. Bernie would move mountains for me, sure, but he'd also make my life hell for the next 6 months, asking when I planned to replace the funds. Not because he was heartless, just because he cared about that money more than most people care about their kids. I tried, for the first time in our marriage, to gently shut Lauren down. I don't know, Laura. That's a lot. Her face fell. Emma says Derek has a solid plan. They'll pay us back. They're already making decent money. It's just this one bump. I swear. I didn't believe it for a second. If Derek couldn't manage a budget, a sudden pile of cash wasn't going to fix anything. It was like giving a drowning man a glass of water and telling him to swim harder. But I didn't say that, because I wanted Lauren to be happy. I wanted to be the kind of husband who supports his wife, not the one who lectures her about her idiot brother in Law's Failed Dreams. So I sighed, got up, went to my office, and wrote out a check for $60,000. As I handed it to her, I said, "But we're gonna need to be tight for a while until they pay us back." Spoiler alert, I never expected to see that money again. There's an old saying, if you lend money to family, assume it's a gift. That way, you're not bitter when it never comes back. I kept telling myself that, over and over. This was a $60,000 peace offering, a goodwill gesture to Lauren, to her sister, and yes, even to that overconfident goofball she married. I knew it wouldn't fix their problems. Derek couldn't run a successful lemonade stand, let alone a furniture business. But I wasn't doing it for him. I was doing it for her. I wanted to be the good guy, the supportive husband, the guy who doesn't say no. And so, I handed over $60,000 and waited. 3 or 4 months passed before I realized just how big a mistake that was. Around 3 or 4 months after I loaned Derek the money, I was home one Saturday, tearing the place apart, looking for a flash drive. It had some important business data on its sensitive stuff I needed for a presentation, and, like an idiot, I'd misplaced it. Not the first time. I have this terrible habit of sticking important things in completely illogical spots when I'm distracted. After checking all the usual places, my desk, nightstand, kitchen drawers, I wandered into the guest room, scanned the table, opened a drawer, even dropped to my knees and looked under the bed. When I stood up, something struck me as off. The bed looked wrong. Lumpy. Too lumpy. The sheets were pulled up, but lazily, messily, like someone had just crashed there and rushed to make it look undisturbed. Except it wasn't. Not even close. At the time, I brushed it off. I figured maybe Lauren had used it for a nap or something. She did that, sometimes said our bed wasn't as comfy in daylight, whatever that meant. Later that evening, while we were both cooking dinner, I casually mentioned it. "Hey, did someone crash in the guest bed? I went in there earlier, and it looked kind of lived in." Lauren's reaction was way more intense than I expected. Her eyes widened, and she stammered, "Oh, yeah, that was me. I, took a nap. I was cleaning and got exhausted, so I just, sorry, I forgot to fix it up." I didn't think twice about it. That's how much I trusted her back then. I remember smiling to myself, thinking how funny it was that she seemed so embarrassed, like she thought I'd be mad she'd taken a midday nap. I even teased her about it, kissed her on the forehead, told her she was cute when flustered. In hindsight, that moment should have set off every alarm in my head. But it didn't, and it wasn't the only sign I ignored. Over the next year, little inconsistencies started stacking up, small oddities that I dismissed because I didn't want to believe what they might mean. Her job at that little independent bookstore, chill, quiet, sleepy, suddenly required these epic 5 to 6 hour staff meetings every Tuesday, and they were sacred, untouchable. "Don't call me during that time, please," she said. "It's intense. We cover a lot." I nodded, believed her. Then there were the bruises. Random ones. On her hips, her inner thighs, once on her collarbone. I asked a few times gently, "Where'd that come from?" She always had an answer. I bumped into the desk. I slipped in the tub. Oh, Cooper jumped up on me too hard. And like an idiot, I nodded. Again. Then came the underwear. Stuff I didn't recognize. More risque than what she normally wore. It'd show up in the laundry, and I'd think, that's new. But I never asked. Maybe I didn't want to know the answer. But the tipping point? Orange juice. I know. It sounds stupid, but stay with me. Lauren had started shopping at this fancy high-end grocery store. Nothing wrong with that except they didn't carry the orange juice I liked, the one I'd bought for years. She came home with some overpriced organic stuff, and I asked her to switch back. She said no, claimed this store was on the way home from her Tuesday meetings and that it was just more convenient. But that didn't add up. The bookstore wasn't anywhere near that part of town. The route didn't make sense. And suddenly, something started to itch at the back of my mind, an idea I didn't want to admit to myself, but couldn't quite ignore anymore. And then, less than a year and a half after that first loan, Lauren started making subtle noises about needing to support Emma and Derek again. By that point, Derek hadn't paid back a dime, not a cent. The 60 grand was long gone, and I had zero interest in lighting more cash on fire for a business I knew was swirling the drain. So I brushed Lauren off with a half-hearted, "Let's talk about it later," hoping she'd take the hint and drop it. She didn't. Instead, she kept circling back, mentioning how Emma and Derek were about to lose suppliers, how they needed a store upgrade, how a second loan would bridge the gap until things turned around. I tried to be firm, but I could feel myself slipping into that all-too-familiar trap of wanting to be the nice guy, the helpful husband, the good in-law. I didn't want to say no outright. So instead, I came up with a plan. I finally caved and told Lauren I'd go take a look at Derek's business plan and check out the store in person. Honestly, I was hoping that once I saw the mess up close and confirmed it was a financial disaster, she'd back off, that maybe reality would do the talking for me. So I met Derek on a Monday morning at his shop. As expected, he greeted me with the enthusiasm of a golden retriever on espresso, grinning, back-patting, throwing around terms like vision and revitalization, like we were about to launch the next IKEA. He walked me around the floor, pointing out all the potential, introduced me to his 3-person staff like they were a Fortune 500 dream team, and beamed like I was already sold. When we paused near a leather sectional with one busted leg, he finally launched into his grand plan. According to Derek, all he needed was a bit more cash for inventory, some modest renovations, a marketing push, and the store would absolutely take off. He spoke with such conviction it almost sounded believable. Like he really believed it. But I didn't. Not for a second. Eventually, we sat down in his cramped little office in the back. I tried to be diplomatic, soft-spoken, measured, told him I had some concerns, that his cost structure was high, that his margins were thin, that even with more stock, he probably wouldn't boost revenue unless he restructured the whole business. I didn't want to crush him, but I also wasn't about to pretend I thought this was a smart move. Stingently, I suggested he think about selling the business and trying something else, something that didn't involve hemorrhaging money in an outdated furniture store run like it was 1986. He bristled immediately. Offended, defensive, told me that all he needed was a facelift, a kickstart, and that everything would fall into place. I could see the wall go up behind his eyes, the same look Lauren got when she didn't want to hear something. I couldn't bring myself to say no to his face. So I did the cowardly thing. I told him I didn't have enough personal cash on hand to loan him that much, and that any significant help would have to come from the trust. I'd talk to Bernie, I said. See if we could work something out. No promises, though. That was my out just enough of a maybe to let him down later, with Bernie taking the blame. It was weak, I know, but I wanted to keep the family peace. I wasn't ready to make enemies. Not yet. And truth be told, Bernie would probably sign off if I really pushed. But I'd spent years building up this myth around him that he was the impenetrable gatekeeper of the family money. I leaned into it, made it sound like I couldn't overrule him even if I wanted to. It gave me cover, and Bernie never seemed to mind playing the heavy. I think he kind of liked it, honestly. At the end of the meeting, Derek stood up, clapped me on the back, and shook my hand like we were sealing a multi-million-dollar deal. His face lit up like he'd already won. That confident, clueless smile made my stomach twist with guilt as I walked back to my car. I pulled out of the lot, heading down the highway, trying to talk myself out of the shame I felt for not being more honest, for letting him believe something I knew wasn't real. You're just buying time, I told myself. Buying peace. And then I saw it. A small grocery store off to the right, tucked behind a row of townhouses. The paint was green. The sign in bold letters. Salvador's. I slowed down, stared. It looked completely unfamiliar, like something out of a dream or a glitch in the Matrix. But that name, that odd specific name, it rang a bell, and I couldn't place it. Not right away. But I kept driving, and the nagging started in the back of my brain, like something I'd forgotten was clawing its way forward. Something about that store was important. I just didn't know why yet. I might open the conversation with Bruce, how I'd lay it out like I already knew everything, bluff my way into a confession, or at least rattle him enough to give something away. But before I could launch into that fantasy, the missing puzzle piece clicked into place. Salvador's. That was the name of the grocery store Lauren had suddenly started shopping at. The same store that didn't carry my favorite orange juice. The one she insisted was more convenient, even though it wasn't near our house, wasn't near her job, and wasn't even remotely close to anywhere she was supposed to be on Tuesdays. Except now, as I sat in Derek's parking lot, I realized something chilling. Salvador's was just a few blocks away. And that changed everything. I made a sharp U-turn and drove slowly past Salvador's, taking in the storefront again with new eyes. The green paint, the lettering, the weird location. Then I doubled back and pulled into the lot outside Derek's store, killing the engine and sitting there, staring at the glass doors like they might confess for him. I pulled out my phone and searched. Salvador's Grocery Store, Chicago. Only one location popped up. This one. The one in front of me. And the store just happened to close early on Tuesdays. Lauren's Tuesday meetings were always sacred. She never took calls, never texted back, always shopped at Salvador's afterward. My mind spiraled. I tried to play devil's advocate. Maybe she had another office nearby. Maybe she met Emma for lunch out here. Maybe she had a gym in the area. Anything? But the logic didn't stick. Every time I circled back, I landed in the same unsettling place. She wasn't shopping here for groceries. She was shopping for convenience, for privacy, for proximity. And what, exactly, was close by? Derek's store. That thought, tugly, persistent, was like a splinter I couldn't pull out. My stomach tightened. I felt the kind of nausea that hits right before you realize your life is about to change. I couldn't shake the idea anymore. I needed more than speculation. So I made a choice. I got out of my car, slammed the door, and headed straight into the lion's den. The door creaked open as I stepped into Derek's store. The place looked the same as always, slightly outdated, dimly lit, a few bored employees pretending to be busy. But now everything felt heavier, charged. Like I was walking into a crime scene no one knew was a crime yet. Near the front counter, a middle-aged guy in a wrinkled shirt was stirring coffee with the focus of a monk. He looked annoyed before I even opened my mouth. "Sorry," he grunted. "I'm on break." I raised my hands in peace. "I don't want to interrupt. I just really need to speak with Derek McKinley. It's about a financial matter we discussed earlier." He didn't even look up, just kept stirring his coffee, then took a slow sip. The way he ignored mate was almost impressive. One more reason that place was circling the drain. I waited a beat. Then, firmer, I said, "It's urgent. Can you call him for me?" That finally got his attention. He looked up at me, squinting like he was trying to remember if we'd met. Then recognition lit his face. "Oh, you're the guy from this morning, right? Yeah, Derek's here. He's in the back with a supplier. Shouldn't be too long. You can wait in the break room." He motioned for me to follow and led me past the showroom into a narrow hallway and into a sad little room with a stained couch, a humming mini fridge, and a flickering television. He handed me the remote and a mug of lukewarm coffee, then shuffled off, leaving me alone. I sat down, heart thudding, trying to calm myself. I had no proof yet, just a growing theory and a hunch strong enough to make my skin crawl. I started rehearsing the speech I'd give Derek, imagining the look on his face when I told him I knew. Maybe I'd lie, say I had photos, recordings, something damning. Maybe he'd crack. Maybe he'd beg. Maybe he'd punch me. Or maybe I'd just have to swallow the shame and move on. But part of me hoped he would confess. Because part of me already knew. I was still rehearsing in my head, picturing how I might drop hints, say I had photos, maybe a video, or even claim that Lauren had come clean herself. Just enough to shake Derek. Just enough to get him to crack. But then, my eyes started wandering around the break room. First, just to kill time. I flipped through some outdated magazines, surfed a few boring cable channels on the fuzzy old television, and then, without really thinking, I started to look more closely. That's when it hit me. If they were stupid enough to use this store as their personal playground, this room, the break room, was probably ground zero. And if that was true, then the ratty pea-green couch in the corner was their stage. I stared at it for a moment. Faded fabric, a couple of stubborn coffee stains, a rip along one of the armrests. The kind of couch that looked like it had been rescued from a curb on trash day and somehow survived out of sheer spite. My stomach turned, but I couldn't help myself. I pulled off one of the pillows and felt my pulse spike. There were sheets underneath. It was a fold-out bed. I glanced down the hall to make sure Derek was still busy. Then, carefully, I pulled out the bed. What I saw made my throat tighten. The sheets were a mess, crumpled, uneven, and unmistakably used. A couple of faint yellow stains right where you'd expect if someone had just finished having sex and didn't care enough to clean up. A smear of lipstick near the edge. The faint scent of perfumeone I recognized. One Lauren wore sometimes when she wanted to feel pretty, she used to say. I stood there, staring at the bed like it had slapped me. Then I crouched down, noticing a few bits of debris under the pull-out frame. I reached my hand in, stretching across the grimy carpet to fish out whatever I could find. Piece by piece, I pulled out the evidence. A cheap ballpoint pen, 37 cents and change, a broken ceramic coffee cup, an empty tube of KY gel, and then a crumpled restaurant receipt. My eyes narrowed as I unfolded it. A Mexican place, one Lauren liked, the kind of little joint with handwritten checks and killer carnitas. The signature at the bottom was unmistakable, smooth, curved, elegant. Lauren's. Now, intellectually, I knew it wasn't hard evidence. It could have been from anything: lunch with a friend, dinner with her sister, whatever. But in that moment, that one slip of paper felt heavier than a ton of bricks. Because it didn't stand alone anymore. It was the final piece in a puzzle that had been forming slowly and painfully in the back of my mind. The messy guest bed, the bruises, the mysterious underwear, the secretive Tuesdays, the grocery store detour, and now this. It all snapped into place. Lauren was cheating on me. With Derek. And that realization, it didn't just hurt. It ignited something. Suddenly, confronting Derek felt pointless. Bluffing him, pressuring him into a confession, it would only warn them. Tip my hand, make it harder to prove anything later. And I wasn't going to blow my one chance at confirmation. Now I knew when they were together. I knew where they were doing it. I had a trail. And if I was smart, if I was cold enough, I could turn this sick little affair into something that worked in my favor. I folded the bed back up, sat down on that awful couch, and clenched my fists until my knuckles popped. My heart was pounding like a drum. I'd been cheated in business before, swindled in card games, lied to by contractors, but nothing in my life not even close compared to this. The hollow, burning sting of betrayal from the person you trusted most. I wanted to scream, to punch the wall, to curl up and sob, all at once. But something else was rising through that chaos. A clear, focused flame. Revenge. The desire to get even burned so bright, it cut through everything else. I forced myself to breathe, to think clearly, be calm, be strategic. I needed to stay smart if I was going to pull this off. So I started planning. I began analyzing their weaknesses, Lauren's blind spots, Derek's arrogance, and I asked myself how I could use those flaws to hit back, hard. My first thought, naturally, was to beat Derek to a pulp, but that would land me in jail faster than I could throw the first punch. Then I thought about the loan. I could call it in, demand full repayment, ruin him financially, humiliate them both. But I remembered something Bernie had told me once, years ago, when I was thinking about taking out a loan from a bank that was throwing around flashy incentives and pressuring me to sign. He'd leaned back in his chair, looked me dead in the eye, and said, "If you owe someone money, especially someone who doesn't have your best interests at heart, then they own you. They've got you by the balls." That phrase stuck with me. And right now, I wanted to be the one holding Derek by the balls. I glanced toward his office. He was standing near the front, shaking hands with some supplier, all smiles and charm, like he didn't have a care in the world. I waited a moment, then gave a little wave. He spotted me and waved back, walked the supplier out the door, and quickly made his way down the hall. "Hey, Mike," he said, a little surprised. "Forget something? Need more details?" I shook my head, smiling like we were old pals catching up over a beer. "Nah, not exactly. I've been thinking about our conversation, and I realized I might have given you the wrong impression." His eyebrows lifted, curious. "I just want to be clear," I said, keeping my voice warm and sincere. "I think you're doing a hell of a job with this place. I really do." I might have sounded overly cautious earlier, but that was just me being thorough. You know how I asking the hard questions, being a responsible investor. Derek chuckled, visibly relaxing. "Of course, man. All good businessmen do that." "Exactly." I nodded. "And more importantly, your family. I want you to know I believe in what you're building here. I really do. This isn't just about making a safe investment. It's about doing what's right. For you, for Emma, for Lauren, for all of us." His face practically lit up. He nodded, beaming. "I didn't want you going home with doubts," I continued. "I'm going to try hard to get this funding pushed through. Now, I don't have that much in liquid assets. Most of my money's tied up in the trust, but I think I can convince Bernie to approve the withdrawal." Derek's smile stretched wider with every word. "Man, that's amazing. You won't regret it. This business is on the edge of a breakthrough, I'm telling you. Once I get that cash, it's all green lights." I forced myself to match his enthusiasm, grinning like we were celebrating already. "That's what I like to hear. I'm not worried, not one bit." "Neither should you be," he said, thumping his chest lightly. "You're going to see a return on this loan, Mike. Guaranteed." "Of course. There'll be a formal agreement," I added quickly, keeping my tone light. "Bernie's big on protecting the trust. So we'll need to do everything by the book collateral. Repayment terms, interest, the usual. But I think we can get everything drafted and signed in just a few days. And if everything goes smoothly, you'll have the funds within a week." Derek exhaled with relief and grinned so hard it almost looked painful. He reached out, gave me another one of those firm, overly eager handshakes, and said, "Mike, you're saving this business. I mean it. Thank you." I nodded, hiding the storm brewing inside me behind a smile. Because I wasn't just going to loan him the money. I was going to set a trap, one that would lock him down so tight he'd have no idea what hit him. And the next morning, I walked into Bernie's office, shut the door behind me, and dropped into the leather chair across from his desk. He was on the phone, scribbling notes with his usual intensity. Without looking up, he held up a finger. "Give me a sec." I was visibly fidgeting, leg bouncing, fingers tapping on the armrest. I could feel the heat behind my eyes, like adrenaline was still simmering from the night before. Bernie noticed. He always noticed. As soon as he ended the call, he looked up at me with a squint and asked, "So, Mike, what's got you so twitchy this morning?" I cleared my throat, leaned forward. "Bernie, I think I need access to the trust. I'm going to authorize a large loan." He sat up straighter, nodding thoughtfully. "All right. Shouldn't be a problem. What kind of loan? How much are we talking?" He turned toward his monitor, clicked through a few folders, and pulled up the spreadsheet that tracked the trust balances and allocations. Classic Bernie, always 2 steps ahead. I swallowed hard, then leaned in even closer, lowering my voice. "Before we dive into the paperwork, I need something from you. Complete confidentiality." He raised a brow. "Mike, you know I always—" "No," I cut him off. "I mean it. You might feel tempted to loop in Wallace or someone else from the family or the office. Don't. Not this time. This stays between us." He tilted his head, eyes narrowing. "Mike, if this is something illegal—" "It's not," I said quickly. "Not illegal. Not even close. In fact, what I need is the opposite. I want something airtight, clean, legally bulletproof." Bernie leaned back in his chair, folding his arms. "Go on." "I need you to draft loan documents, solid ones, the kind that a court would drool over. Every term has to be crystal clear, collateral locked in, default penalties spelled out in painful detail." He tapped his pen on the desk. "You're expecting a default, aren't you? Let's just say I'm building for it." He eyed me suspiciously. "Mike, it kinda sounds like you're setting a trap." I didn't flinch, more or less. He was silent for a beat, then asked, quietly, "Who are you trying to trap?" I took a deep breath, my jaw tightening. Then I looked him dead in the eye. "My brother-in-law, Derek." "And why?" I hesitated just a second. Then, "Because of Lauren." That was all it took. Bernie's eyebrows shot up. His mouth opened like he wanted to say something, but nothing came out. He closed it, blinked a few times, reached for a glass of water, and took a long drink. Then he exhaled. "You're sure about this?" "Very." And that was that. Within a week, the paperwork was ready. Bernie drafted one of the most brutally unforgiving business loan agreements I'd ever seen, clean, legal, and absolutely loaded with landmines. I personally delivered it to Derek. He brought in his lawyer for the review, a short, muscular guy named Tim Sauer, who also happened to be his cousin. We sat down together in the back office. Tim flipped through the documents with surgical focus. "Okay," Tim said finally, setting the stack on the table. "I looked this over last night. It's a standard business loan, more or less. But there are a few things I want to walk you through before you sign." Derek leaned back, flashing that clueless grin like he was posing for a family barbecue. "Of course. Hit me." Tim cleared his throat and turned to face him, tone noticeably more serious. I couldn't help but notice the slight look of pity, or was it disdain, in his eyes. "First off, this is a $425,000 loan, repayable over 7 years. The interest rate's standard, nothing shady. but payments start right away, just over $6,000 a month. Derek nodded eagerly. Yep, got it, no problem. Now, Tim continued, the actual amount you'll receive is $365,000. Derek's brow furrowed slightly. Wait, why not the full? Because, Tim said, cutting him off, Mike is recovering the $60,000 you previously borrowed. That gets paid back from this amount, and the rest goes to you. He paused. That clear? Derek blinked. Then, slowly, smiled again. Oh, sure, totally. Makes sense. Yeah, I get it. He turned to me and gave me a thumbs up. Thanks, man. Seriously. I nodded calmly, hiding the satisfaction bubbling beneath the surface. He had no idea what he'd just stepped into. I see. Italian, Derek replied, smugly adding a clumsy little accent to the word, as if it would earn him some extra credibility. Tim just looked at him flatly and sighed under his breath. All right, Tim continued, clearly trying to keep things moving. Next point. The loan is secured by collateral. That means it's tied not just to your business, but also to the property up north, Kiewik, right? Where the duck hunting cabin is. Derek nodded, pointing vaguely toward the documents. Yeah. They want to make sure Mike's trust is covered if things go sideways. But hey, he let out a short laugh. That's not going to happen. The business is solid. I think so. Mike thinks so. Right? He turned to me with that grin that had started to make my skin crawl. Oh, absolutely, I said, beaming. Derek walked me through the books. I think he's sitting on a gold mine. I kept the grin plastered on my face. Of course, you know Bernie, he's ultra-conservative. He plans for catastrophe even if you're selling umbrellas during a thunderstorm. So he's big on securing the loan, just in case. Tim turned toward Derek with a more serious look now. Do you understand what that means? If you default, the business, the property, everything tied to this loan can and probably will be transferred into the trust, including that duck hunting land. That's been in your family how long? Since my grandpa? Derek replied, dropping the bravado for a moment and putting on a more somber tone. Yeah, I get it. It's serious. But I'm confident. I really think this loan will turn things around. It's safer than continuing without it. Tim raised one brow but nodded. All right. But you also understand that if you're even 3 months late on payments, penalties start stacking immediately. Derek's grin returned as he looked back at me like we were sharing an inside joke. Of course. But hey, Mike knows I'm good for it, right? I just smiled back. My teeth were clenched behind it. He thought I'd never let Bernie enforce the penalties, that I'd protect him. He had no idea. Back at home, Lauren was practically bouncing. She went on and on about how exciting it was that Derek's business finally had the financial support it needed. She kissed me like I was some kind of savior. Kept repeating how relieved Emma would be, how proud she was of me for believing in family. I smiled, nodded, said all the right things. But inside, I was screaming. It took everything in me not to say what I was really thinking, that the biggest problem with Derek's business wasn't money, it was Derek, that no amount of cash would make him competent. But I kept my mouth shut, because this wasn't about helping anyone. This was about watching them fall slowly, legally, inevitably. I just needed time, more information, evidence, leverage. Until then, I had to keep playing the role, the patient husband, the supportive brother-in-law, the guy who didn't suspect a damn thing. It was harder than I thought it would be. Having dinner with Lauren without cracking was a nightly test of will. Being in the same room as her, pretending I didn't know she was sneaking off every Tuesday to roll around on that disgusting fold-out couch. Torture. And sex? It became something I avoided. If she pushed, I had to force myself through. I'd emotionally numb, physically detached. Eventually, I found myself retreating to a dark memory. A night from years ago when I was 18, during spring break in San Diego. My buddies and I ended up across the border in Tijuana, chasing cheap thrills. We drank too much, watched shows that were more disturbing than arousing, and eventually ended up somehow. I couldn't even make it home that night. I trashed my office, instead swept everything off my desk in one furious swipe, puked into my trash can, twice. At some point, I threw a paperweight at the door so hard it left a dent in the wood. Then I sat down and watched the footage. The details were just as horrifying as I'd expected, and somehow worse. I fast-forwarded through the surveillance video of that Tuesday, speeding through the hours until finally there she was. A woman in a blue dress with a large shopping bag appeared in the frame and walked into the break room. My stomach turned. I slowed the video down to normal speed and braced myself. She set the bag on the floor, pulled out fresh sheets, and began changing the bed on the pull-out couch. She moved casually, like it was just another Tuesday routine. I already knew who it was, but seeing her face confirmed what I'd feared. It was Lauren. After she made the bed, she pulled a bottle of wine and 2 glasses from the bag. Then she reached behind her neck and undid the zipper on her dress, slipping out of it with a familiar ease. She folded it neatly, put it back in the bag, and sat down on the edge of the bed in nothing but thigh-high stockings, French-cut panties, and a ridiculously revealing bra reading a novel like she was in some avant-garde burlesque theater. It was surreal. The whole thing reminded me of this bizarre performance art exhibit I once saw in a small gallery in New York. A woman stood on stage, nearly nude, reading incoherent spiritual poetry while everyone just stared at her chest. It wasn't art. It was exhibitionism, pretending to have depth. Lauren was doing the same thing, just with better lighting and worse context. Then Derek entered. Lauren immediately set the book aside, smiling like a teenager sneaking out of the house. She stood, arms wide, and embraced him. After a moment, she pushed him back with playful frustration. "You're late," I could almost hear her saying. He chuckled and said something back, probably that same awful line about how she could never wait for him to come. I'd heard it before. They both laughed like it was a treasured inside joke. Then they kissed. Long, familiar, comfortable. And Lauren Whiffer reached down, undid his belt, and dropped his pants like she'd done it 100 times before. There was nothing exciting or passionate about what followed. It was mechanical, rehearsed. They knew each other's rhythms. No surprises. Just a steady, boring metronome of movement as he pounded away like it was a chore on his to-do list. About 10 minutes in, Derek finished. Lauren followed seconds later, her legs stretching out, her head snapping back in a way I'd once thought was meant only for me. They lay in silence for a while, tangled, catching their breath. Then Derek rolled onto his side, and they started kissing again, slow, easy, intimate. I couldn't look away. I couldn't breathe. The pain that hit me was cold, sharp, total. I felt like the video had burned itself into my brain, each frame etched into my memory forever. I knew then there would be no forgiveness. No working it out. No closure. Only fire. And as I leaned forward to turn off the recording, they kept talking. Lauren rested on her side, head propped up by her elbow, casually tracing shapes on Derek's chest with her fingers. They whispered, smiled, so happy, so content. Then Lauren sighed. "I hate using this place," she said. "It's gross. I wish we had somewhere better." Derek turned onto his side to face her. "Come on, Laur. We can't risk a hotel. Someone could see us. And last time we used one of our houses, we almost got caught. This is the safest bet." Lauren shrugged. "Yeah, I know. I just wish we had a nicer place to play." "I just hate this room," Lauren said, her voice tinged with annoyance as she adjusted the sheet beneath her. "Changing last week's dirty sheets to make love on them again? Not exactly what gets me going." Derek chuckled and reached up to gently stroke her cheek. "We could always just run away together." She laughed lightly, like he'd just said something charmingly absurd. But then Derek's smile faded, his eyes growing serious. "No, seriously, Lar. Have you ever regretted marrying Ryan? I mean, I love Emma Shea's a good wife, but sometimes, I don't know. Don't you think maybe it would have been better if you and I had ended up together instead?" Lauren didn't respond right away. She sat up, wrapping her arms around her knees and pulling them close to her chest. Her back leaned against the old couch, and for a moment, she looked reflective. Thoughtful. Derek, she said softly, how many times are we going to have this conversation? He didn't answer, just watched her. What we have, she continued, is special. Very special. But no, I don't think it would be better if we got married. She looked over at him, then sighed. Of course, we'd be happy. You and I always have fun, and we connect on a different level. But I love Ryan, and you love Emma. She leaned over and kissed his cheek, her hand absently rubbing his chest in gentle circles. If you and I were together, it wouldn't work the same. Ryan's a one-woman kind of man. Always has been. He would never start anything with me if I were married, and Mindy, she'd lose her mind. Derek looked disappointed, but Lauren smiled at him sweetly. The truth is, people like you and me, we love big. We have this gift. We can love more than one person at a time. And honestly, we need to. She paused, then added with quiet certainty, this is what's right for us. But them, Ryan and Emma, they're wired differently. They're more rigid. Monogamy is sacred to them. They'll never understand what we do. They'll never be able to juggle it emotionally and still make everyone happy. That was the moment I snapped. I didn't even realize I'd picked up the paperweight until I'd hurled it at the office door with a crack that echoed off the walls. Because hearing her rationalize what she was doing, hearing her talk about gifts and emotional capacity like she was some kind of enlightened being, it was too much. I loved her. God help me, I loved her. Or maybe I loved the version of her I thought was real, the one who looked me in the eye and said, I'm yours. Maybe she was the only woman who ever truly made me feel that way. Wanted, chosen, enough. And in return, I got lies. Not just betrayal, but justified betrayal. Like she'd rewritten morality to suit her needs and made herself the hero of the story. She didn't see it as infidelity, not even a mistake. In her mind, it was a contribution to the world, an act of love she was obligated to share. That night, I didn't go home. I passed out on the couch in my office with the lights off and a stack of divorce paperwork sitting beside me, half signed. The next evening, when I finally walked through the front door, Lauren was standing in the middle of the living room, arms crossed, fury radiating off her like static. Where the hell were you last night? She snapped. I was worried sick. You didn't call. You didn't text. You didn't tell me anything. I raised a hand slowly to stop her mid-rant. Last night, I said evenly. I was at work. I got drunk. Couldn't drive home, so I stayed there. She blinked, stunned. Her jaw slackened a little. Wait, you got drunk? At work? I nodded, the corner of my mouth twitching into something between a smirk and a grimace. Well, she said, voice cracking slightly. You could have told me something. I almost called the police. What the hell is going on with you? I didn't answer. Not yet. I just stared at her. Not with hatred. Not with sorrow. With clarity. I walked right past her, straight into the living room, not saying a word. Dropped onto the couch, kicked my feet up onto the coffee table, and pulled my briefcase into my lap. I flipped the latches open with slow, deliberate clicks. Behind me, Lauren let out an exaggerated sigh, sharp and theatrical, and stomped into the room after me. She dropped into the chair across from me like she owned the place and shot daggers at me with her eyes. Okay, she snapped. How about some answers, Ryan? Why'd you drink yourself stupid at work? What the hell happened last night? What is going on? I didn't respond right away, just kept rummaging through the case, calmly pulling out a few folders and laying them down beside me, one by one, like I was setting up for a presentation. Just a second, Lar, I said coolly. Need to get my things in order first. I stacked the papers neatly, took my feet off the table, and placed the folders there instead. Then I leaned forward, elbows on my knees, and rubbed my hands together like I was about to carve a Thanksgiving turkey. I looked up and gave her a tight smile. All right, I said. Let's begin. Begin what? She asked, her voice now tinged with uncertainty. Begin, I repeated. You know after what happened last night. Her posture shifted. The confidence she came in with, the righteous anger, had already started to shrink. I could see the fear creeping in, the way she blinked faster, the slight tremble in her fingers. Ryan, she said quietly, can you at least tell me what this is about? Oh yeah, I said, nodding slowly. I watched the video. She blinked. What video? The one of you and Derek. On that couch. In that room. Having sex. Yesterday. I gave her a sharp, thin smile. Honestly, it was kind of disturbing. So yeah, I got drunk. Maybe went a little overboard. Hope you understand. The color drained from her face. She froze. Completely. Her mouth opened. Closed. Then opened again, like she was trying to form a sentence but couldn't remember how vowels worked. Her lips moved without sound, her eyes darting between the papers on the table, the door behind me, and my face. I could practically see the denial trying to crawl its way to the surface, looking for any lifeline it could cling to. Finally, she managed to speak. Barely. I don't understand, Ryan. What are you talking about? Oh, come on, Lauren, I snapped. You can't possibly be this stupid. I gestured to the stack of papers and folders in front of me. I'm talking about you and Derek. What you've been doing for a year. Every goddamn Tuesday. In his break room. On that nasty couch. Her breath hitched. She gasped and slapped a hand over her mouth. I waited. Nothing. Then, after a long pause, she whispered, Ryan, we can work this out. Please, let me explain. I think if you just let me talk, I can make you understand. Oh, I understand just fine, Laura. I reached into the briefcase again and pulled out a DVD in a plastic sleeve. I held it up for a second, then slid it slowly across the table toward her. This is your copy, I said. Don't ask how I got it, I've got my own. For reference. And, I don't know, maybe to help you write a book someday. The Sacred Art of Cheating While Feeling Morally Superior. Subtitle, How I Turned My Marriage into a Case Study in Self-Deception. She stared at the disc like it might explode, her body subtly pulling away, as if its mere presence could hurt her. You're welcome, I added flatly. For a second, she looked like she might get up, maybe rush me, maybe fall to her knees and be gore, maybe try to claw the DVD away and snap it in two. She shifted forward, one hand gripping the armrest. Then she stopped. I raised my hand sharply, palm out, and she froze mid-motion. She hesitated, then sank slowly back into the chair. She bit her lower lip for a moment, nervous. Then she locked eyes with me and started speaking with this strange, rehearsed calm. Her voice was low, steady, but I could see the tremble beneath it. Like she was trying to sound grounded while everything inside her cracked. Ryan, listen, she said. You have to try to open your mind here. There's no reason to destroy our lives over this. We have different values, different emotional skill sets. I love you. I've always loved you. And I've always been willing to accommodate our differences. I hoped you could do the same. I let out a sharp, mocking snort. Different values and talents? I echoed. Are you seriously trying to pitch cheating as a talent now? She blinked. That's not what Because if that's the bar, I cut in. I'm pretty sure half the world is talented. Hell, I'm talented too. But I didn't lie. I didn't sneak around. I didn't destroy my marriage for a thrill on a discount sofa. She took a deep breath, eyes drifting toward the ceiling, like she was praying for patience. Or a script. Okay, maybe talent isn't the right word, she said. It's ability. That's it. I have the ability to love more than one person, to really, deeply love them. I always have. She looked back down at me, her voice regaining a trace of that faux therapist calm. Just because we've been taught these outdated ideas about love and exclusivity doesn't mean they're right. There's no real reason why I can't or shouldn't share that love. This isn't about deception. It's about emotional depth. I leaned forward slowly, my voice tight with disgust. Lauren, stop. Just stop. I could feel the heat rising in my throat, my hands gripping my knees to keep from shaking. You're not enlightened. You're not progressive. You're not some new age oracle of emotional flexibility. You're just selfish. That's all this is. Selfishness wrapped in spiritual wallpaper. Her eyes flared, but I didn't let up. I get it. You think you're special because you can juggle 2 men at once and still sleep at night. You call it love. You call it depth. But it's just the same old crap people have been doing for centuries. I paused. Let her feel it. It's not a gift, I said. It's not ability. It's cheating. Something snapped in her then, like a switch flipped. The guilty, apologetic Lauren vanished in a blink, replaced by something sharper, angrier. Are you calling me a cheater? She hissed, her voice rising. Well, fine, if that's how you see it. But I never stopped loving you. And I never stopped loving Derek, either. So no, I didn't betray anything. I didn't lie about how I felt. I followed my heart. You're the one who can't handle that. She leaned forward now, face flushed, chest rising and falling. You're clinging to some medieval idea of what relationships should be. One person, forever, no mistakes, no complications. It's not real, Ryan. That's not life. That's fantasy. She stared at me like she was daring me to contradict her. Her confidence pulsed off her like heat. I stood my ground. Do you want to live like this? I asked. Bouncing between lovers like you're playing emotional musical chairs? One guy one day, another the next? Because sure, go ahead. Be whoever the hell you want. I pointed to the table, to the DVD, to the papers. But don't stand there and pretend it wasn't cheating. Don't act like you were honest. Because you weren't. You never told me. Not once. And you knew I wouldn't have agreed to it. You knew it would destroy everything. She flinched, just slightly. Her eyes fell away from mine. Yeah, I continued, pushing forward. You lied by omission, which, for the record, is still lying. You made me and everyone else think we were something we weren't. A committed couple. Partners. Exclusive. I leaned forward, narrowing my eyes. But you weren't committed. You were sneaking around like a teenager with a fake ID, having your little adventures in that furniture store like it was some twisted romantic getaway. You lied. You lived a lie. And you dragged me along for the ride. By now, her eyes were glassy with angry tears. Her lips trembled, not with sorrow, but fury. She shook her head slowly, tightly as if that could undo everything. She just sat there, shaking her head, lips pressed tightly together, angry tears clinging to her lashes but apparently out of words, out of excuses, out of illusions. I stared at her for a moment, waiting, giving her the chance to say something, anything real, but she stayed silent. So I leaned forward, slid the divorce papers across the table toward her, and said quietly, "Read it. Find a lawyer. It's real." Finally, she spoke, barely above a whisper. What if I don't want a divorce? I let out a breath, not laughing but close. Then you're out of luck, Lore, because you're getting one. I paused just long enough for it to sting, then added, with a thin, not so well-hidden grin, but hey, that doesn't mean you'll be alone. That night, I packed a duffel bag, grabbed my briefcase, and left. I didn't slam the door, didn't say goodbye. I just walked out of that house like I was clocking out of a job I should have quit years ago. I moved into a small apartment closer to work. It was cold, sterile, barely furnished, but it was mine. And without Lauren's scent in the sheets or her lipstick on the glasses, it was peaceful. I snapped back into the person I was before she came into my life. Focused, work, obsessed, isolated. A machine with a calendar, a businessman, a loner. I avoided anything social, turned down every invitation, and buried myself in spreadsheets, late-night emails, and espresso-fueled tunnel vision. The hours at the office became brutal long, grueling, relentless. and people noticed. My assistant, Sherry, mentioned I looked like I hadn't slept in weeks. A client asked me if I was grieving a death. I kind of was. Because sitting at home meant thinking. Thinking meant replaying everything, her voice, her laugh, the way she undressed for him, wondering whether she missed me. Or worse, if she was still sleeping with Derek. So I chose work. Work didn't lie. Work didn't sleep around. Work, at least, made sense. Now, under normal circumstances, I'm the kind of guy who negotiates everything, contracts, settlements, supplier deals. I'm relentless when it comes to closing, but not this time. I didn't want a war. I didn't want drawn-out meetings or tearful courtroom drama. I didn't want more time with her. I wanted out. So I did the unthinkable. I offered Lauren a large lump sum to walk away. Clean break, quiet exit, generous support, with one condition: she had to agree to a fast, uncontested divorce. If she didn't, the offer would vanish. Deep down, I guess a tiny part of me hoped she'd fight, that she'd say no, that she'd insist we try to fix it, that something about our marriage meant more to her than money. But no. She gave a few half-hearted objections, asked for clarification, maybe feigned hesitation. And then she signed. 60 days later, our marriage was over. A couple of months passed. The dust began to settle, and right on cue, Derek started slipping. Payments stopped coming on time, then stopped altogether. Bernie sent formal warnings, polite at first, then much less so. Eventually, Derek got a letter he couldn't ignore. It spelled things out clearly. We were coming for everything. He called. He emailed. He made excuses. Swore the money was coming. Just a delay. Just a hiccup. I told Bernie to go full pressure. Turn the screws. No sympathy. Eventually, Derek begged for a face-to-face meeting. And that's when I knew he was desperate. Not just short on money. Empty. Dried up. Panicked. Perfect. I wanted the money, but I wanted it to come from her. From Lauren. And I had a feeling it would. We scheduled the meeting for after hours. The building was mostly empty, just Sherry, my assistant, still outside in case we needed to prepare paperwork. I waited in my office, sipping coffee, reviewing documents, completely composed. Then Derek walked in. He looked like a mess, sweaty palms, hesitant steps, wild eyes. He reached out for a handshake, his fingers damp and shaking. And trailing a few paces behind him was Lauren. I would have laughed at how transparent this whole performance was. But I didn't laugh, because I could barely breathe the second I saw Lauren walk through the door behind him. She wasn't just there, she was present, dressed in one of the outfits she knew I liked. Hair done, makeup perfect, her fiery smile turned on like a spotlight. She sat closer to me than Derek did, subtly leaning in like she was still my wife, still part of this inner circle, still someone with access. And I knew exactly why she was there. She came to tip the scales, to play on whatever emotions I had left, to charm her way into softening my stance for Derek's sake. And for 1 second, it almost worked. I had this stupid, aching instinct to stand up, wrap her in my arms, and kiss her. Like we could rewind the tape, like the last year hadn't happened. But I didn't. Instead, I forced my face into a deadpan mask, nodded once in her direction, and muttered something non-committal, just enough to acknowledge her without giving her anything. Truthfully, I was stunned she came at all. I had planned this meeting carefully, knew exactly how I wanted it to go, and Lauren's presence threw me. I didn't like wild cards, and she was the ultimate one. Part of me wanted to kick her out, tell her to wait in the hall, or better yet, crawl back under whatever rock she'd slithered out from. But I didn't, because something told me watching this fall apart with her in the room might be even more satisfying. Derek started talking, trying to be his usual affable self. He gave me a handshake that was borderline clammy, smiled wide like we were old college buddies, and launched into a half-hearted apology. He wanted to make things right. He hoped I knew how much he respected me. He was sorry things turned out the way they did. Blah, blah, blah. What shocked me was how sincere he thought he sounded. Like this speech was going to rebuild our friendship from the ashes. I didn't even blink. I cut him off cold. "Derek," I said, my voice flat. "Stop. Just stop with this crap. Your apology is meaningless to me." He flinched, visibly, like I'd slapped him across the face. Then he exhaled, looked down, nodded like he was being scolded by a teacher, and tried again. "Okay. All right, Ryan. Let's get down to business." He looked at me, eyes wide, as if I should speak first, like this was my meeting, my favor, my money to give again. I stayed silent, just raised my arms slightly in a go-on motion and leaned back in my chair. He licked his lips. His hand trembled slightly as it hovered above the table. He raked his fingers through his hair and finally started talking. He claimed he fully intended to repay the money, said he was a little short right now, blamed Bernie for being too aggressive, accused him of pressuring him unfairly. He insisted the business was just about to turn around, right on the edge of recovery. One more chance, a little more time, and he'd be able to catch up, maybe even thrive. He said all the right words. But I wasn't listening to the content. I was watching him, watching the beads of sweat forming on his forehead, the way his smile twitched at the corners, the way his right hand jittered on the table like it didn't belong to him. And then I spoke. "Derek," I said slowly, "if you weren't a liar by nature," I finished my sentence without blinking, "I would consider giving you a reprieve." Derek's eyes widened, a flicker of hope flashing across his sweaty face. He leaned forward, mouth parting to speak, but I raised a hand and cut him off before he could start another desperate plea. "Come on, Derek," I said, calm but cutting. "Let's be real here. It's kind of hard to trust a man who didn't think twice about screwing his married sister-in-law." I let that sink in. I wanted the words to sting, to rattle his spine. "And then," I added, "you walk into the husband's office asking for money. Again, that's not just betrayal. That's insult. That's comedy." Derek shifted awkwardly in his seat, shrinking into himself. Beside him, Lauren cleared her throat. Her voice came out small, strained, and unnervingly soft. "Ryan, please, you can't punish Derek because of me." I turned to her sharply, the fire already back in my eyes. "I can do whatever the hell I want, Lauren." She recoiled slightly, stunned by the venom in my tone. "Why are you even here?" I asked, my voice now rising. "Did you really think you could charm your way into this room and talk me down? Play the concerned ex-wife card for old time's sake?" She started. I didn't let her finish. "You thought wrong." I leaned toward her with a cold glare. "Honestly, all your presence does is remind me how Derek figuratively screwed me by literally screwing you." She flinched. Her eyes welled. Her chin trembled. But she didn't say another word. "Do us all a favor," I added, "and sit there. Look nice. Keep your mouth shut." And she did. She folded back into the chair, blinking hard to hold back the tears, biting her lower lip like she was trying not to scream. I turned back to Derek. "All right, Derek. Here's how it's gonna go. You're going to repay the debt. On time, according to the agreement. Or I start seizing assets. Every last thing." Derek shook his head, more panicked now. "Come on, Ryan. You can't take my business. You can't." "I can," I interrupted. "And I will. If you don't pay." He started to protest, voice cracking. "But you know I can't get bank loans. I've tried. My credit's shot. And my family, Ryan, they can't help. They don't have that kind of money." I stared him down. "Don't insult me with that crap. I know your family has money." "No," he said quickly, shaking his head. "They really don't. If they could, they would have already helped." "What about her?" I turned and pointed directly at Lauren. "Did you ask her for money?" Derek looked confused, taken off guard. "Lauren? No, Laura doesn't." I laughed, loud and bitter. Of course she didn't tell you. I turned my gaze to Lauren, and this time, I smiled wide. It wasn't kind. I gave her a check. $150,000. Cash. Free and clear. Derek's head snapped toward her, eyes wide, jaw slack. His face said it all. He had no clue. Lauren looked like she wanted to vanish. Well? I asked her, mockingly. Is that not true, Laure? She fidgeted in her seat, her voice suddenly smaller than ever. Yes. I mean, I have it, but I need that money. I laughed again, leaning back in my chair. Really? That's rich. You were so sure Derek was a great investment when you begged me to give him money the first time. Why the hesitation now? Aren't you confident anymore? She didn't respond. Come on, Lauren. Help me out here, I said, eyes gleaming. If I should believe in him, shouldn't you? Her throat bobbed as she swallowed. Then she glanced over at Derek's wide, silent stare pressing into Herond back at me. She inhaled shakily, then squared her shoulders. I can cover part of it, she said, her tone barely defiant, more desperate than bold. Derek's face lit up with relief. He gave her a soft smile. She offered one back, weak and forced. And together, they stood up. Derek walked taller than he had when he arrived. Lauren looked smaller. They left my office, him with hope in his step, her with disappointment in her eyes. I held the door open as they left, offering one final reminder like a knife slipped under the ribs. Remember, Derek, I don't care how. I just care when. I want my money. He turned back and tried to summon some bravado. You'll get it, he muttered through clenched teeth. Lauren didn't say anything. She just gave me one last worried glance, her confidence already beginning to crack. Over the next few months, I returned to what had become my refuge, work. I buried myself in tasks, ran on caffeine and deadlines, avoided personal conversations like they were contagious. I refused every dinner invitation, declined every networking event. My life became a closed loop of spreadsheets, contracts, and silence. And I liked it that way mostly. But even behind the armor of busyness, the betrayal still bled through. It was in the smallest moments, a restaurant napkin that reminded me of one of our dates, a perfume wafting past on a stranger that smelled like hers, a dream that would jolt me awake in the middle of the night, her voice, her laugh, the image of her pulling Derek's belt loose. And then there was the check. Each month, like clockwork, a small envelope would arrive at my desk, Derek's monthly payment, handwritten, awkwardly signed, and every time I opened it, I felt a twisted satisfaction. Like I had turned their affair into a toll they were forced to pay penance, one small bite at a time. It didn't heal anything, but it numbed the sting. That numbness didn't last long. Emma Derek's whiffer reached out. First, it was an email, then another, then a phone call. I was surprised she even had the nerve. Apparently, Derek and Lauren had finally come clean to her, though, no doubt in a way that cast their affair in the gentlest, most noble light possible. We made a mistake. We followed our hearts. We didn't mean to hurt anyone. The usual garbage. What shocked me was that Emma forgave them. According to her, she'd guessed what was going on, even suspected it for a while, and they'd all come to some kind of arrangement. She said it like it was a scheduling issue. Apparently, Derek and Lauren were still seeing each other, openly, consensually, no shame, no consequence. To make matters worse, Emma actually had the audacity to float the idea half joking, half serious that maybe I should consider getting back with Lauren. As if everything that happened could be erased with a group hug and a fresh start. My responses were cold, final, brutal, even. By the end of our second call, I was certain I'd made her cry, and I was glad. I never heard from her again. But what gnawed at me most was the realization that Lauren and Derek were still standing, together, unbothered, that they might come out of all this clean paid up, partnered, and perfectly satisfied. It made my skin crawl. I was terrified the narrative would shift, that I would become the bitter ex. The guy who just didn't get it. That modern love had evolved and I was the sad dinosaur left behind, arms crossed, heart in ruins, while the people who hurt me thrived. But I needn't have worried. 9 months after I met Derek and Lauren, their little kingdom went up in flames literally. The furniture store burned down in a spectacular 2-alarm fire that made the local news and lit up the sky. It even threatened neighboring buildings. Firefighters worked through the night. The whole thing looked like a scene from a movie. I wasn't there, but Bernie saw it. He called me immediately. He was furious. "You put trust money in this clown's hands," he snapped, "and now it's literally gone up in smoke." I listened calmly, then told him what I had already decided. "If he defaults," I said, "I'll buy the loan myself, personally. The land is still worth something. Its location alone makes it salvageable." Still, it didn't stop the questions, especially when the investigation began. And when the fire's origin was traced to suspicious catalysts, the insurance company promptly refused to pay. No insurance, no revenue. Derek defaulted on the loan. And just like that, I ended up purchasing what was left the scorched skeleton of the store and 35 acres of Mississippi duck hunting land tied to the loan. It was a fire sale in every sense of the word. The criminal investigation dragged on for nearly 6 months. The detectives put together a solid circumstantial case against Derek and Lauren. They built their theory piece by piece: how the store had been bleeding money for months, how Lauren had been throwing cash at it to keep it afloat, how Derek had desperately scrambled for loans and, when that failed, quietly tried to offload the business at a steep discount. No buyers bit. They couldn't place either of them at the scene the night of the fire. No witnesses, no gas can receipts or suspicious purchases. But the circumstantial evidence? It stacked up. Investigators found multiple searches for the word arson on Lauren's home computer. They pulled phone records showing her communication with 2 men who both had prior convictions for arson. And a week before the fire, she withdrew $15,000 in cash with no explanation. It was enough for the DA to feel confident, but not enough to guarantee a conviction. Derek and Lauren Lloyd up hard, hired someone sharp, expensive, and clearly paid with the last drops of Lauren's blood money. The DA wasn't stupid. He knew he was in for a fight, so he started negotiating. I imagine the charges started big first-degree arson, fraud, conspiracy, and then slowly got bargained down as the lawyers played their game of chicken. The defense wouldn't settle for anything higher than 4th-degree arson, so the process stalled. A trial date was floated, pushed, delayed, rescheduled. I waited. Then, finally, it came. I was placed on the witness list. I remember sitting in the courthouse lobby, that morning-hard wooden bench, cold tile floor, paper coffee cup next to me, and a folded newspaper in my hands I wasn't really reading. I tapped my foot unconsciously, adrenaline buzzing just beneath the skin. Then the door opened. A court official walked out and, with zero drama, announced, "The trial's been canceled. A deal has been reached. You're all free to go." Just like that. I stood to gather my things, still stunned, and as I turned toward the exit, they appeared. Lauren and Derek, flanked by officers and their smug attorney. A crowd of reporters surged toward them like vultures, microphones out, cameras rolling. But neither of them spoke. They kept their heads down. Derek peeled off to speak briefly with Emma, then disappeared down the hallway with the guards. But Lauren? She spotted me instantly. And, God help her, she walked right over. No shame, no hesitation. Just the same fire in her eyes that once made me fall for her and now made my stomach twist. "Well, Ryan," she said, chin up, tone theatrical. "Is this your lucky day? Is this what you wanted? For me to finally be punished for my sins?" I laughed. Bitter. Hollow. "No," I said. "What I wanted was a faithful wife. A marriage that worked. I'll never get that from you." I let the silence hang for a second. "Absent that," I added, I'll settle for my money. She snorted. Well, you're not getting any of this now, are you? Oh, I got some of it, I said, flashing a dry smile. And I've got the store. She laughed like she thought I was bluffing. What? That charred ruin? What are you going to do with it? Has it stopped smoking yet? I grinned. You'd be surprised what a smart businessman can do with a good piece of property, even a smoking one. Her smile faltered. Her nostrils flared. Her lips tightened just a touch. Then she squared her shoulders and tilted her head. And now look at you, she said coolly. Alone, married to your job for the foreseeable future. She gave me that old knowing smirk, the one that used to feel like a secret between us. Don't deny it, Ryan. I know you. I know how much you hate meeting new people. I looked her dead in the eye and said, calmly, I'm working on it, Lore. I loved you, I told her, my voice low, steady, certain. But you're not the only woman in the world. She smirked, the kind of smug smile she used to wear when she knew she'd won. No, she said, I'm not the only one, but I don't think you'll ever find, what do you guys call it, an equivalent replacement. She leaned in a little, eyes narrowing. Whether you like it or not, you'll miss me. I stepped toward her, just enough for her to hear the words clearly. I might get lonely, I whispered. But you won't be, will you? I leaned in even closer, barely above a whisper. Good news is, you'll be sharing a nice, cramped space with a bunch of tough, androgynous women, lots of opportunity to spread all that abundant love you've got. Sounds like a win for you, and the lesbians. She froze. For a split second, I thought she might laugh it off, maybe flip her hair, say something clever. Instead, she snapped. Her composure shattered like glass on concrete. She recoiled, face twisting into something feral and venomous. Her whole body seemed to lurch with fury. You sanctimonious, self-centered, emotionally stunted son of a bitch, she screamed, her voice slicing the air. The officers jumped in immediately, grabbing her arms and pulling her away as she thrashed and shouted. You'll be in the same hole as me, alone, bitter, a slave to your pathetic little job. Her screams echoed through the hallway as they dragged her back toward the holding area. Her love for Maya, if it had ever truly existed, was gone. What was left now was nothing but rage, pure, burning hatred. And yet, all I felt was a strange, aching stillness. I stood there, unmoving, as her final tirade rained down like acid. You'll never be happy. You'll always want me. And one day when you're married to some boring ex-secretary, you'll regret not saying yes. The door slammed shut behind her, cutting off the rest. Silence. I exhaled slowly, the taste of bitterness still sharp on my tongue. Then I turned, walked out of the courthouse, and into the pale daylight. No more trials, no more meetings, no more lawyers, or contracts, or emails, or strategies. Just quiet. I didn't know where to go, so I went to the only place that made sense, the site. The one Derek and Lauren had burned to the ground. The air was cold. The wind knifed through my coat and stung my cheeks as I stood at the edge of the blackened lot. The concrete was cracked and scorched, broken glass still glittering under the clouds. Ash crunched beneath my shoes. I looked around at the ruins, wondering what the hell I was supposed to do with any of it. Sell the land, cut the loss, walk away and bury it with everything else they left in ruins. That would have been safe, predictable, smart even. But there was another option. I could rebuild, start over. Maybe even open a new furniture store right on the same ground where Derek failed. Make it loud, flashy, put up billboards across the city. Hell, maybe even television ads, something they couldn't not see. I could even name it after her. Lauren's. Have final sale signs in giant red letters. Everything must go. It hit me then this wasn't just about business. The decisions I was making about this land, they mirrored the decisions I'd made in my own life, the choices I'd defaulted to. Lauren was right about one thing. I had always pulled away from risk, from intimacy, from anything messy or vulnerable. I'd spent my whole life protecting the Fortress Me career, my bank account, my reputation while the rest of the world danced barefoot in the fire. I was safe, but I was also alone. Sitting on a crumbling concrete block in the middle of a ghost town of my own making, I looked around again, still caught in limbo between fear and desire, between what I'd always done and what I might do next. And then,